Great time to get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to RC with Adam. My name is Adam. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the Eachine Cinecan with a Flysky receiver, and we'll be using the FSi6x transmitter. Now, specifically, this is the CrazyBeeF4PRO flight controller. And even more specifically, this is the FreeSky version. But I don't use FreeSky, but I bought the FreeSky included receiver in the quadcopter. So what we're going to be doing is actually installing a CrossoverRX XR401-A, I think it is, yeah, FlySky receiver, and I'll be showing you how to do that, and I'll also show you how to which pads you need to solder if you want to install some other kind of receiver. So for this particular setup, it's going to be Sbus, which is a little different because normally for FlySky receivers it would be iBus, but that is what we're going to do today, so let's get started. By the way, my quadcopter, you'll see it is in several pieces right now. That's because, well, I took it apart, but also because I crashed it really good, and the camera portion and all the plastic attached to the camera came flying off. So I got to figure out how to fix that. But I'm still going to show you how to set yours up, and so that hopefully you too will get to where you can crash it just like this. And if you happen to have a different type of quadcopter, but it uses the same flight controller, the CrazyBeeF4PRO, then all of this type of setup stuff should be pretty much exactly the same. And really most of this setup stuff is still going to be exactly the same, even if it's a different flight controller, because a lot of what we're going to do is the same process. Now I'm going to be going through these bullet points that I have here, and I will have these available on my website. Check in the description for a link if you want to get like a PDF version of this and print it out so you can kind of follow along. All right, the first thing we want to do is disassemble the quadcopter so we can access the flight controller. Now is probably a good time to remove the propellers because we'll need to have those off for safety reasons anyway when we're going to test the quadcopter, and they just kind of get in the way. So go ahead and take those off. And then as far as taking this quadcopter apart, you're going to need to take off the 3 screws that hold on the canopy, the front and both sides. And then it's kind of difficult to access things with the way that this is built because it's so tight and everything. But I found that what seems to work best is if you just kind of rotate the canopy and kind of move it around without detaching any of the wires to access those 4 screws that actually hold the video board to the rest of the electronics there. So those 4 screws, you want to remove those, and then once we get that out of the way, then we can access the flight controller. And specifically to get to those some of those wires that we need to, you're going to need to remove the rear standoff. And so there's like a little plastic piece there, and then the little rubber kind of washer. Once you have access to the flight controller, we're going to install our receiver. Now, like I said, we're using Sbus, but whatever kind of receiver you use, you're going to need power to go to the receiver. So solder the ground or negative wire from your receiver to any negative pad. I used the battery ground, and it's working fine. And then for the positive, this receiver can only handle, I think, like up to 5 volts, and yours is probably the same. So go ahead and solder that to any 5-volt pad. In this case, I'm going to be using the buzzer pad, the positive buzzer pad. So now you need to solder the signal wire to one of the pads. Now, if you are using normal Sbus, then you want to solder it to RX2. That's one of those pads in the middle of the flight controller. If you are using inverted Sbus, then you want to use IRX1 pad, and the I is for inverted, I would think, and that's kind of off to the side there. And this is what we're going to use for crossover receivers. Now, see, some receivers are like inverted, that use inverted Sbus, and some do not. Don't worry about that too much right now. I mean, if you're not sure, you can solder to one and then test it out, and then if it doesn't work, try a different pad. That's actually what I had to do. And then if you want to use iBus, and I think this would also be if you're using Spectrum, then you want to solder the signal wire to RX1 pad, which is going to be kind of in the middle of the flight controller. Now, if you're using Crossfire, you're going to want to use RX2 or TX2 for Crossfire receivers. So this comes with Smart Audio, and Smart Audio, just in case you don't know, is just a feature that allows you to change your video transmitter settings, like the band or the power output on your video transmitter, by using your stick commands on your transmitter. So basically, you go into the Betaflight OSD menu, which it means that you can access your flight controller settings through your transmitter using your transmitter sticks to navigate, and it shows up in the on-screen display there, like when you're looking through your goggles. So anyway, Smart Audio is just a way that you can actually control your video transmitter settings and change those without having to, get your quadcopter and press the little button a bunch of times and look at the little lights, and you can't even see the lights and that sort of thing. So it's handy to have, but if you don't mess with your video transmitter like ever, it's not a make or break kind of thing. But I wanted to keep that. So what I had to do, because we're using IRX1, that corresponds to UART1. By default, the Cinecan has Smart Audio on UART1. So we can't have both things on the same UART, so we need to move the Smart Audio to UART2. So what we need to do is actually move the Smart Audio signal wire to TX2 pad. That's TX2, so not RX2. We want to move it to the TX2 pad. Once you have all the wires connected and stuff, just leave everything disassembled for now, because we want to make sure that we have a good connection with the transmitter and the receiver and the flight controller before we actually put everything back together, because I did that the first time and I had to take it all back apart because I had soldered it to the wrong pad. So just hold off on that, and we'll get everything checked out on Betaflight first, and then you can reassemble it after everything else. Now we'll go ahead and set up the transmitter as desired. We're using the Flysky FSi6x, and this is going to be the same for the FSi6. I'll go ahead and show you that. We can go into the menu by pressing and holding the OK button, and then we can go into the system setup, and what we want to look for, we're going to scroll down using the up and down arrows. What we want to look for is we want to make sure that the aux switches are turned on. So here you can see it says switch on, switch on, switch on. All of these are on, and I've set the channels to 10. So we're going to be using all 10 possible channels. So if you do need to turn this on, be sure to press and hold cancel to actually save it, and then I like to go back in and make sure it's actually the way I wanted it. And then we can go back, let's press and hold OK again. Let's go over to the function setup menu, and then we can scroll down to aux channels right here, and then we want all of these, we want to set up our switches now. What we're about to do is actually assign the channel to each of these switches. So on the transmitter, it's going to be, we have 4 channels used up with the sticks, so this is actually going to start at channel 5. Okay, but so we're going to have channel 5, channel 6, channel 7, channel 8, channel 9, channel 10. But on Betaflight, the aux channels, like aux 1, it starts at channel 5 because aux is for auxiliary, and so that's the first auxiliary channel. So on Betaflight, the switches are going to be aux 1, aux 2, etc. But on the transmitter, the switches are considered channel 5, channel 6, etc. So let's do that right here. So let's just go in here, and we will use the up and down keys to select which switch we want. So we want channel 5 on switch A. We want channel 6 on switch B. Channel 7 on switch C. Channel 8 on switch D. Channel 9 on switch, actually variable A, and channel 10 on variable B. Okay, and then we're back to channel 5. We're going to press and hold cancel. Okay, and then we'll go back in, super duper, and make sure that's all like how we want it. And actually what you can do, just in case you're interested, you can check, let's see, oops, let's go back up here. You can check, oh, right there to display, click on display, and you can see which switches are which. And now we can move on to the next step. Now we want to bind our receiver and our transmitter. We have our receiver attached here, and I'm just going to connect it to the 5-volt USB power to provide power to the receiver. But if you were going to plug like a battery in or something, you definitely want to have your props off. So you'll see the receiver is now blinking fast flashing red LED. That means it's in bind mode, and that's because this one automatically goes into bind mode if it doesn't find the transmitter within a certain amount of time. So it's already in bind mode, it's ready to go. And then with the transmitter here, let's put all the switches in the up position, and then I'm going to press and hold the bind key, and now I'm going to power it on. And you see it said binding okay. And now we're bound. And then here the receiver has a steady red LED. So now we are connected to the quadcopter. Now, when you get your quadcopter, you probably do not need to flash the firmware because it's probably is working just fine. But if you want to flash the firmware, I will show you how right now. Do keep in mind it's going to get rid of all of the default settings like that come from the factory, like however they set this up. It's going to get rid of that, or at least that's how it happened for me. That's what happened. So once your quadcopter is connected, you want to click Update Firmware. Also, one more thing, you may need to get drivers in order for your quadcopter to connect to your computer. I'm using a Mac, and it seems to be working fine, and I don't believe I downloaded any drivers. But if it's not working, that could be the thing. You'll see on the front page here on Betaflight, you can get the CP210X drivers, the STM USB VCP drivers, and possibly the Zadig driver. I'm not sure if you'll need that or not, but check that out. Joshua Bardwell has a fantastic video about like drivers and that sort of thing if you have the issue, but I would just give this a try first. So we're going to go to the firmware flasher right here. So what I'm using, and I believe this is the correct one, is the CrazyBeeF4. For me, it's FR. I don't think it actually matters that it's FR for Flysky. I don't think that actually matters because I'm not actually using the built-in receiver, but I just went ahead and did that one anyway because that is technically the flight controller that I have. And then this is the most recent version. And then I'm not really going to mess with all this stuff unless I have to. You can read all this stuff, warnings and stuff, and then you click Load Firmware online like that. And then flash firmware, and this, now keep in mind, this is going to get rid of all the settings on the quadcopter right now. So we're going to hit flash firmware, but what this does is we're basically updating it. We're updating the flight controller, the firmware on there. So usually it's a good thing. Usually they'll, any bug fixes or there might be improvements and that sort of thing. So we'll just go ahead and let it flash and do its little thing. And I've flashed this a few times, and I have not had any issues with it, being incomplete flashing or anything. So it seems like it's been very reliable. Fun fact, while we're waiting, some flight controllers you will need to put into boot mode or bootloader mode, and sometimes there's a button, or sometimes you have to put a paper clip between two little tabs. But on this one, it's automatic. So just keep that in mind. If you're working with a slightly different configuration, you may have to put your flight controller into bootloader mode. Okay, programming successful. Cool, that's all there is to it. So that is how you flash the flight controller just in case you need to. And let's go ahead and connect here to Betaflight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset all of my settings just in case you're starting from a blank page. We'll connect back in here. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want to show you, like in the ports tab, UART1, UART2, these are not set up for anything. The configuration tab, nothing's changed here. This is pretty much default for this one. And here, like on the receiver, this is for the built-in Flysky receiver, which I'm not using. So the easy way to get all of the settings that we're about to go through, we're going to go through all these tabs, is to go into the CLI, the command line interface, And what you can actually do is, let me minimize this window, is you can get what I did is I saved basically all of my settings. I'm just going to grab all of this, and you can actually just load this from like the file straight in there, but we'll just do it, copy and paste, because that's what you might be doing. Look for this either in the description down below, or I will have a link to my website where I will have that. So what we can do is we've copied all of that text. We come in here to this little text box, and we're going to click paste, and it just looks like that. But if you arrow up, you can go through all the different lines right there. So now we're just going to type in enter, just press enter, and then that's all going to load, and it automatically saves, and it kicks you out. That's why it kicked me out. So we'll connect back up in here. Well, let's try this one. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we are connected now, and if we look in here, ta-da! Look at that. So now we have some different changes here, different changes right here with the receiver, and we're going to go through all those right now. And I really recommend that you go through all of these different things and make sure that they are how they're supposed to be, like based on what we're about to talk about right now. Even if you do the fast way, just to make sure that everything works, because I'm not totally sure that everything will carry over exactly depending on your version of firmware that you have. Okay, so let's go down the list here. So first thing we want to go, I like to enable expert mode, and that's gonna make some more options here on the left-hand sidebar show up. Oh, let's maximize this. There we go. So first thing, we want to calibrate the accelerometer. So you can kind of see here, I'm holding this. It's pretty much calibrated, but what you want to do is set your quadcopter on like a level surface, and then say, okay, that is level, and then and preferably without touching the quadcopter, you click calibrate accelerometer, and then this is what tells the flight controller basically what is level. So this is especially important if you're using auto level mode, because if it's off, your quadcopter is going to start going in a weird direction because it thinks that it's level. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that page. Let's go down to the ports tab. In the ports tab, you want to make sure that UART 1 right here, the serial RX column, you want to check that little box right there. You want to check it. So you want it to be yellow. And then in the UART 2 row, you want to go all the way to the peripherals, and you want that set up for VTX TBS Smart Audio. And that's going to give us that smart audio that I was telling you about. So, and for all of these tabs, you want to click Save and Reboot. So we'll just do that, even though we didn't change anything, just to give you an example. So then we'll connect back in here, because if you click Reboot, it's going to kick you out. If it just saves it, it'll just save it. So that was the ports tab. Let's go to the configuration tab. In the configuration tab, we want to make sure that this should be set automatically, but I have this set to DShot 600 for the ESC motor protocol. You want to make sure that your motor stop is disabled. So you want it to look like that. Let's go down here. We have the arming. You want to make sure that the arming is set to 180 degrees. What that means, that's like your arm angle, or I think it's called small angle technically. But what that does is when you set it to 180, it allows you to arm at any angle. So when you arm your quadcopter, you can turn it on and spin the propellers at any angle. So you could be stuck upside down in a tree and still arm your quadcopter, which could come in handy. If you don't have that set to 180, then your quadcopter, if it's tilted, you might not be able to arm it. Okay, so personalization, Cinecan, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to leave it Cinecan. This part is important. Receiver, this receiver box right here. So you want to set the serial, you want it set to serial-based receiver, SpecSat Sbus SUMD, and you want this, the serial receiver provider, set to Sbus. Okay. And then, let's see, serial receiver. Okay, good. And then I don't really like to have air mode always on. It kind of depends. I would personally, I don't leave air mode always on. I usually just set it up in the modes tab. So I would leave that as off. OSD, let's see here. Yeah, you want your OSD on, anti-gravity, fine, dynamic filter, fine, all this other stuff, fine, don't even worry about it. You go ahead and click save and reboot. The Failsafe tab is the next one that we want. And really here we're just checking to make sure that this, the stage 2 settings, that this is set to 4, this is set to 100, and then we want stage 2 to be drop. So it just drops out of the sky. We just want to make sure that that is set that way. If you change anything, click save and reboot. Now let's go over to PID tuning. Okay, PID tuning. Now you're like, Adam, what are PIDs? I don't even understand. Don't even worry about the PID tuning part. Honestly, I'm still learning about them. So what we really want is the rate profile settings. And we want to make sure, mainly we want to make sure that it's not set to like the default settings, because those are just way too touchy, personally. I like more of a mushy stick, and so these are my particular rate settings. So the RC rate is set to 155 for everything. Super rate for roll is 50, pitch is 37, yaw is 20, RC Expo 60 all the way down. So we get roll 611 degrees per second, pitch 485, yaw 388 degrees per second, and then I haven't messed with the throttle curve at all. But anyway, these are the rates that I use like from the Budget Basher, and I really like them. And partially, maybe I've just gotten used to them. In any case, this is what I would suggest, but you can play around with those. Of course, it's a very personal preference kind of thing, but this should get you started, and I think it'll be better than the standard rates. If you change anything, click save down there at the bottom, and then we'll move on to the receiver tab. Now, on the receiver tab, and we'll come back here to test our transmitter and everything, but right now we're just going to make sure that all the boxes are how they're supposed to be. So channel map, you want that to be AETR1234. For the RSSI channel, it should be aux12 for this particular receiver. Some receivers are different. And one more thing, I changed the RC deadband to 2, positive 2. Now that I think about it, actually, it won't really hurt to have this, but the reason why I needed that was because my transmitter, it had a little bit of jitteriness in the center of the stick. So the RC deadband was set to 2, and so basically that it acts kind of like a little buffer between the actual movement of the stick, a virtual buffer. So you can just get rid of that. I don't think you'll really notice the difference though. But if you don't want it, just make it 0 and then click save. Let's move on to the modes tab. Now here's the modes tab. These are all the ones that I have used. I clicked hide unused modes right there, but if I show you all the modes, these are all the options you have right here, but I don't use most of them. So these are the ones that I do use, and we just want to make sure that everything is set up like this. Again, this is for my personal, how I like my switches. So you might want your switches differently, and that's fine. You can move these boxes around, and it doesn't have to be exact, but we want this little yellow tick mark to be under the boxes when the switches are active, which we'll test out in a second here. So ARM, we want aux1. It needs to be within this range, somewhere around there. Basically, it's going to be around 1,000. Angle is aux3, beeper is aux5, air mode, which actually I keep forgetting to test out the beeper. Air mode is aux3 also, and we want this large range right there because we want it to cover the mid selection. And then flip over after crash. I actually have not used that yet. Probably should have tested that, but that's going to be on aux2. And then acro trainer is also going to be on aux3, but it's going to be the very middle of aux3. So that's going to be the center position on that switch, on the 3-position switch. And that's it. If you make any changes, be sure to click save. And that's all that's gonna do. Acro trainer, by the way, just in case you don't know, it's like training wheels, is basically exactly what it's like. So it allows you to tip the quad, or pitch, roll the quad in any direction, just like normal air mode, but it only lets you go so far, like 20 degrees, and that's it. So you're not going to get into a situation where you flip over like all the way and you don't know how to get out of it, or you get like turned around. So you're basically going to be staying upright, which I think is actually really great. Try it. You might like it if you're learning how to fly. And finally, we're going to go to the OSD tab. We're going to go to the OSD tab here, and this is how I have this set up. I'm actually still kind of playing around with how I want my my on-screen display set up and have everything on here. I'm kind of playing around with having it on the bottom of the screen, but I'm thinking about maybe moving it to the top of the screen. But it did occur to me that it would be useful to have all the information kind of in one spot, instead of having like some up here and some up here and, you know, some on the bottom. Because then that way what I can do is actually just take a little section of this. I can take a little section of the DVR footage and then overlay it on like the HD footage, like either from a GoPro or from the Cinecan, the Caddx Tarsier camera. So I'm just playing around with this, but you can do it however you want to do it. And you basically just check these little things, these little boxes right here. And these are 1, 2, 3, those are your different profiles. So you want to make sure it's on you check the box in the correct profile that you're going to be using. But all these different things, you can do like a crossbar, compass, and you can't use everything unless your flight controller is actually set up for that. So like GPS, this thing doesn't have GPS, so that wouldn't help me at all. But any kind of stuff you want to change, you can do timers, alarms, different stuff. You can play around with it. You can also change the fonts up and stuff. And if you do want to move something, you just drag it around this little screen right here. Do keep in mind that you have this whole box right here, but your goggles may not actually show this much of an area. So that is why on here I have this set up so that this, like where it says Cinecan, that's going to be the bottom of my screen, of my goggle screen. So I'll be able to see this in the bottom of my goggles, but if I had it down here, it would not even show up in my goggles. So that's something to keep in mind. If you make a change to this, go ahead and click save. So that's it for the Betaflight setup. Now what we're going to do is actually make sure that all those settings work how we want them to. So we're going to get a battery and plug in our quadcopter, and then we're going to test out the transmitter and make sure that everything corresponds correctly. And just a little side note, just be careful when you do have all these components sitting here and you're testing with the battery plugged in and stuff. Just make sure that you don't have any of the metal parts touching the other metal parts, especially like the positive and negative pads there, because I think that happened and I had a little bit of smoke. Oh shoot. But everything seems to be fine, so just be careful. Okay, now we have our transmitter, we got our quadcopter connected to Betaflight, and let's get in here and connect our quadcopter. Here we are in the main screen in Betaflight, and so now we can actually test out to make sure our transmitter is talking to the quadcopter and everything's working right. So the first thing we want to do is go over to the receiver tab. We're going to go in here and you can see all these colors. Ooh, look at the colorful bars. They're all moving, and you can direct your attention to the preview screen. That's pretty cool because that shows you what your quadcopter does when you move your sticks. So you can see yaw, pitch, roll, all this stuff. Not really throttle. Throttle doesn't really do anything, but you can see there on the bar, that light blue, that it is moving. Good, so now we know that everything is working in here. We can go into the modes tab and check that out. And so you'll see all the modes we have here that we set up. Notice these little yellow tick marks. Right now, they are all, or almost all of them, are at 2000. So again, for us, that's kind of the off position because that means they're down. And then if we flip them up, you'll see that the yellow tick mark, like on the arming, for the arming switch here that I have set up, this one moves over to the 1000. And so the same with the flip over after crash. So that's how you would set this up. If you wanted it to be in a certain position, you could slide these bars around and make them different sizes. Now, let me take a second to go over these switches and like what they do and how I have them set up. So starting from the left, this is the arming switch. I have all of my models, like quadcopters and airplanes and everything. The arming switch is always this switch. That way I never get confused And when I'm flying around, it's very easy to keep my finger there so I can flip the switch if needed, because normally it's in the up position when I'm flying, and I can just flip it down to disarm. Very good. This switch next to it is the flip over after crash switch. So what that does is if I crash and I'm upside down, it's also known as turtle mode, and I'm upside down, what you can do is flip this switch and then arm your quadcopter, and then use your pitch or roll stick here to flip your quadcopter. So it basically reverses the motor direction so that you can provide thrust in the in the opposite direction to flip yourself over. And then once you are not flipped over anymore, flip those down and then rearm, and then you're good to go. And then this little knob right here is the beeper. Actually, I haven't even tested to see if this thing actually works yet, but normally that's where I set up the beeper. And I just have it in this one little section so that, I guess potentially you could have all kinds of different modes, sort of in different sections with this one aux switch. That could be kind of a cool idea. But anyway, if it's all the way turned clockwise, then the beeper should turn on. But again, I actually haven't tested that, but that's how I would have it set up. Okay, so then this switch, this is a 3-position switch. This is switch C on the transmitter here. And this one is going to be all the way down is angle mode or auto level mode. And then up one is going to be acro trainer. And I have it set so that it is also air mode enabled. And air mode is it's sort of like an extra feature to acro mode, okay? And then all the way forward is just acro mode with air mode. So acro mode means that you have complete control over the quadcopter. You have to be the one to make sure that it's level if you want to hover, and when you pitch forward like that, and then you let go, and the quadcopter is going to stay at that angle and just keep going forward. So it's really great once you get used to it. It can be a little challenging to learn how to fly. So that's why I think that acro trainer, that middle position, that could be very helpful. Okay, so now that we know that our switches actually work and they will line up in the position that we want to for the right modes, let's do an actual function test of the motors. And the way that we're going to do that is first we need to go into BETAFLIGHT, into the motors tab. And you'll see that there is right here in this little box that says motor test mode arming notice. When you click this button here, that means that you can arm your quadcopter. So you need to make sure that your propellers are off. Then what we're going to do is we need to get a battery. And I'm just going to use this larger battery here. This is actually a 2-cell battery, but just something to power the quadcopter. And I like a larger battery because then I don't run my small batteries down when I'm just kind of using this on the table here. So we have our quadcopter powered. Let's make sure our components are, this one's kind of extra taken apart right now because I've got to do some work on it. But just make sure that your quadcopter parts are staying out of the motors. Okay, so now what we can actually do is arm the quadcopter. So let's click that button, button right there. I understand the risks. So now we can arm the quadcopter with our switch right here. Oh, that's okay. I was wondering why it wasn't arming. The throttle wasn't all the way down. So if the throttle's not all the way down, it will not arm. So you got to put it all the way down. That's a good lesson there. So we have it armed, and this tab is actually useful right here, this page, because we can see the different motors. And so if one motor was way off, there could be something wrong with it. So right now, I just switched it into angle mode. So you'll notice that it makes weird sounds and does different things. That's normal. And then if you raise the throttle a little bit, you can hear them. You can hear them kind of change their pitch, and they're sort of speeding up or slowing down. That's normal because it wants to be level, but it can't be level because there aren't any props on there. And then once you flip it into acro mode, you'll notice that the motors should spin up evenly because at that point you're not really using the auto level feature, so they're not going to be trying to automatically level themselves. Cool, so we know that's working. Now what you want to do is go ahead and just power off your transmitter, and the motors should shut off in just a few seconds, just like that. So that's like how we set up our failsafe so that it would drop out of the sky. So after a short period of where it basically says, okay, we lost signal, let's make sure we're not going to get signal back anytime soon. Okay, we're not. And then it shuts off. And then let's see if we can actually rearm. Sometimes you can't. You know, like if you get a failsafe, let's see. Hey, we can. Okay, cool. So once you check out all that stuff and make sure your failsafe works, you can check out get your goggles and make sure that you can see the screen and I mean see through the camera, and that the OSD looks the way you want it to. I can't do that right now because the camera got ripped off of this one when I crashed. So you can do that, and then what you want to do is reassemble the quadcopter. You can put some propellers on there, and then start out with like a low hover flight just to make sure everything works like it's supposed to, and then do a nice gentle FPV flight. You know, you don't want to get up like too high in case you have some kind of maybe a receiver issue or something. So, you know, just kind of go slow when you're first testing it out, and that's it. So there you go. That is how you set up this quadcopter, and like I said, this will work for a lot of other quadcopters as long as they have the same flight controller, and you'll be pretty much good to go. If you have questions or if something is not working for you, leave me a comment, because I or someone else may be able to help you, and hopefully we'll get you up in the air very soon. If you like this setup guide and it was helpful to you, consider subscribing to this channel so you can catch more helpful videos, and give this video a like if you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.